Well, and I think the understatement of the year is when you said
Yeah.
divorce is full of emotion because
Yeah.
it is a lot. And I do know the judge's perspective is you mentioned that too. They used to just think, you're wasting our time. They look at it like, if you could have got yourself together, you wouldn't have to be on my docket today. Their biggest
Yeah.
concern is what's best for these kids. You guys are adults, because the female perspective, when they're so concerned about the kids, sometimes they don't want to share the kids as much, right? They don't want to let them go. And in their mind, you mentioned, the dad that maybe one spouse doesn't know as much. They don't know the teacher's names, or they don't know the doctor's names. They don't know what their kids are even allergic to with food, right? There's some
Right.
situations like that.
Yeah.
So they look at it like, well, why do you all of a sudden, or maybe that was the big argument, try to get you involved more and you wouldn't. Now all of a sudden you want half custody. So the perspective from the other side could be, is it because, what's the first thing I said important? Money.
Yeah.
We
The
all
money. Yeah.
know
Out sport. Yeah.
that child support is going to be based on those nights and days and time with the kids.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
thoughts on that?
Yeah. Yeah. It's true. And you want to make sure that that's not driving the discussion. And that's why I say, like, in the very first meeting I ever have with a potential client is talking about this and setting expectations. And we're not going to, first of all, there's no law that says you get half the time with your kids. So that's sort of like a win. That would be the best case scenario, that you end up with half the time. That's really the most you're going to get, right? Unless you've got something really unusual going on. So you say, well, that's the maximum amount of time, but what's reality here? What are your work hours and how involved are you with the kids now? And you have to kind of lead it to, you're not going to say, I want half the time just to get no child support or some low child support number in it. But I think too, the money is an issue. The emotions is in it. The emotion is overwhelming. I mean, I can meet someone for the first time. They're going to make me cry in the first meeting. I mean, some of this stuff is really heartbreaking, and you just have to help them. You have to be a lawyer, but they don't need too much lawyer in that first meeting. They need someone who just can kind of hear them out, because they don't have anyone else to talk to. Usually they're afraid, they're ashamed. They don't want people knowing about it. They're very isolated and alone, whether it's men or women. And I think too, what you touched on with kids that is important is it makes sense that if your relationship's broken, the kids are kind of all you have. So then it is very hard to give up that time with them and talk about shared custody, because you've been functioning where they're like the only good thing in your day, because you're in this relationship that's no good. And that makes it all the harder to have a real discussion about it. But we try to just guide it from the beginning. Say, you're going to get somewhere between every other weekend and half the time, and it's going to land somewhere in there. And it's not a trophy to be won. What ends up with custody, you got to work it out. Even if the other person has problems, they need help. They don't need to be thrown out with the trash. If they need mental health things going on or substance abuse, the courts look at it that way too. They don't just throw people away. They want people to get better and to be a functioning parent. They know the kids need both parents.